Fola stepped out of the airport terminal in Lagos with the quiet confidence of a man who had tasted hunger and later learned to eat in plenty. The city smelled the same, hot, sweaty, restless, but it didn't choke him the way it did 8 years ago when he first boarded a plane to the UK with just his degree and 25,000 naira in his account. Back then, life was rough. His first 3 months in the UK were a mixture of long nights in the cold rooms and endless job rejections. He survived on bread, borrowed winter jackets, and the kindness of strangers, mostly from the small Nigerian church near his flat. They didn't have much either, but they would always ask after him, share a warm meal after Sunday service, sometimes slip him small cash or groceries. One elderly woman once gave him her coat and said, "God bless you, my son. It's not much, but I know what it means to be alone abroad." He never forgot that quote or that kindness. Years passed, Fola finished his master's, got an internship, and climbed from data analyst to product manager. He launched a logistics software company and sold it 2 years later. Then came smart investment, clean partnerships, and silent breakthroughs. By the time he returned to Nigeria, he wasn't just comfortable, he was wealthy, quite billionaire. No interviews, no private jets, just a man who remembered what hunger taught him. Fola didn't return with noise. He bought a decent house in Lekki, built a modest tech hub on the mainland, and ran everything with little public presence. If you saw him at a restaurant, you wouldn't know who he was. Just a dark-skinned man in a plain shirt, always tipping the staff well and living quietly. He kept his faith too, but he didn't attend any church physically, not yet. Lagos churches overwhelmed him. Too loud, too showy, too focused on titles and positions. So, he picked one online. The sermons were solid, the pastor charismatic, and their live stream was always on time. For over a year, he joined midweek prayers and Sunday services from his living room. And he gave a lot. Each month, a large tithe left his account, sometimes 6 figures, sometimes 7. He never put his full name, just F. Ade. He continued in that manner until one day, something changed. He was on YouTube watching a replay of a midweek service when a suggested video caught his eye. The title read, "Why I Left Church the Day I Needed Help and My Pastor Ignored Me." He clicked. The woman in the video looked broken. She spoke about years of faithful giving only to be turned away when she came for rent assistance. Other videos followed. More testimonies, more pain. Churches don't care about the poor. Tithes are funding pastors, not people. Fola sat in silence that evening, watching one video after another. He didn't want to believe it, but something inside him stirred. Not anger, not judgment, just disappointment. Was that how God's house had become? He remembered the quote he was given in London, the warm rice, the quiet kindness of a small church with nothing. That was what sustained him, not flashy lights or branded envelopes. And then, without even thinking too hard, he whispered out loud, "If I enter that church today looking like I used to look in London, would they even let me sit down?" He paused, then smiled faintly. Again, he reached to his phone and tapped the X app. His feed was mostly business and faith-based accounts, motivational content, and sermon clips. But tonight, something different caught his attention. A tweet with over 26,000 likes sat on the top of his timeline. "I paid tithe for 8 straight years, 1 eviction notice, and I begged my pastor for help. He asked if I was a worker in church. I left his office that day and never came back." Fola blinked. He tapped to open the thread. The replies were even worse. "Same here. I gave faithfully, but when my husband died, Nobody called. Not even a text. They only know your name when you give millions. If you dress poor, they treat you like distraction. If you are not in a department or close to someone, forget it. Your tithe is just filling their Lexus. I once went to church hungry. After service, they packed food and left with it. Nothing for the rest of us. He scrolled for nearly 15 minutes. Testimonies from people who had given faithfully, tithed differently, but felt abandoned in their most desperate moments. It wasn't just random noise either. These were full-blown stories, screenshots, church names blurred, dates, even photos of envelopes and bounced WhatsApp conversations with church admins. Fola's stomach tightened. He clicked on one particular story from a woman named Chika. She had posted a photo of herself with a shawl over her head, holding her crying toddler in a corridor. This was the day I came to church to ask for help with school fees. They told me I was not on the priority list and should try next quarter. I walked home that day with this girl crying from hunger. Fola sat back against the headboard, phone still in his hand. He wasn't judging them, not completely. He knew churches had structure. He knew not everyone could be helped at once. But there was something deeply wrong about the tone of all these stories. There was no grace, no warmth, no humility. The church was starting to sound like a bank with a cross at the door. He locked his phone and stared at the ceiling. Then he unlocked it again and went straight to the church website. The same church he had been supporting online. The same pastor he had followed for over a year now. Solid preaching, no scandals, always professional. But now, he had questions. And something inside him whispered, what if they are just like the rest? What if I hadn't been rich? What would they have done with me? He exhaled. His voice came out quieter this time. Let me see them in real life. Let me meet them the way I once was. Poor, tired, unknown. Fola didn't sleep much that night. He kept pacing, thinking, remembering, debating with himself. What if I'm overthinking this? What if they are not like the churches in those threads? But his spirit remained unsettled. By 6 a.m., he stood before his wardrobe, pushing aside his clean white kaftans, well-ironed natives, and polo shirts. Then, he opened a drawer that hadn't been touched in years. At the bottom was an old mustard yellow shirt from his student days, slightly faded, frayed at the cuffs, still fits somehow. He pulled it out, alone with a pair of brown chinos and rubber-soled slippers. No cologne, no watch, no phone. He grabbed a soft-cover Bible with curled edges and tucked it under his arm. He didn't call his driver. Instead, he locked the house and quietly walked down the street to take a taxi to church. The church compound was large, with glossy tiles and a colorful welcome banner flapping gently in the breeze. Cars lined the parking lot, some new, some old, but all clean and sharp. Fola stepped through the side pedestrian gate and took in the scene. Ushers stood neatly by the entrance, dressed in matching uniforms. The security man with a walkie-talkie eyed him briefly, then turned away. He walked in slowly, adjusting the Bible under his arm. "Good morning, sir," a female usher said. She didn't smile. He replied softly, "Good morning, I'm here for the first service." She looked at his outfit for half a second, then turned and pointed. "You can sit at the far right section, back row, close to the exit." The hall was already buzzing. Air-conditioned, colorful lights, camera crew adjusting tripods. The choir sang softly as people trickled in. Most were well-dressed. Heels, suits, perfume trails. The air smelled of elegance and expectation. Fola took a seat where he was told. He sat quietly. No one spoke to him. People passed by, exchanged greetings with others, nodded at familiar faces, but he was invisible. He wasn't offended. He just observed. When it was time for praise and worship, the lights dimmed slightly and the lead vocalist raised her voice in a song about divine increase. The screen displayed lyrics. People stood, lifted hands. Fola rose too, but his heart felt heavy. He couldn't shake the contrast in his mind. How in London, Someone always came to say, "Hey brother, good to see you," even when he looked like a walking bill of unpaid rent. Here, he could vanish and nobody would notice. Then the pastor walked in. A trim man in his mid-40s, clean-shaven, sharp suit, polished Italian shoes. He greeted the church, cracked a short joke, then opened to Malachi chapter 3. We've been on a series titled Financial Dominion Through Obedience. Today, we will discuss the power of tithing. Fola listened carefully. It was a good message, scripture-based, logical, well-prepared, but something was missing. It felt clinical. As the sermon neared its end, the pastor said, "Some of you are sitting on your breakthroughs but won't release what is in your hand. Let God see your sacrifice today." The congregation erupted in claps and shouts. "Can I get at least 10 people to sow 500,000 naira into this next phase of expansion? We are building a youth empowerment hub. God bless you as you come." People stood. Some walked forward. Others pledged from their seats. Fola remained seated, still, quiet. He didn't judge. He just watched. The service ended just after 10:15 a.m. People lingered, chatting, exchanging hugs, walking up to greet the pastor where he now stood by the pulpit steps, flanked by 2 personal assistants and a protocol officer. Fola remained seated for a moment, watching. He hadn't expected fanfare, but something inside him still hoped. Maybe a glance, a moment of recognition, "How are you?" from the man whose ministry he'd been faithfully supporting from across the world. Instead, the pastor laughed with a man in a navy blue agbada, then turned to pose for a photo with a young couple. His aides scanned the crowd for key people to bring forward. Fola didn't exist in their eyes. He slowly stood and walked towards the front. Not too close, not making a scene, just enough to be noticed. He approached the assistant standing closest to the pulpit. "Excuse me?" Fola said gently. "Please, can I speak with the pastor briefly?" The assistant, a man in glasses with a clipboard, looked him over briefly, eyes landing on Fola's slippers. Then the old Bible tucked under his arm. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I'm a member, but I attend online. I came physically for the first time today." The man nodded, unimpressed. "Pastor is currently attending to some partners and ministers. You need to book for a Thursday counseling session or come for first-timers registration outside." "Alright," Fola said with a soft nod. He stepped aside. He simply watched the pastor one more time, smiling, laughing, moving from one handshake to another. This man had never seen his face, never read the names behind the tithe alert, but he had received his giving over and over. Fola walked out slowly. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Back home, Fola changed into a clean shirt and sat in the kitchen with a bowl of fruit. He wasn't angry. He was simply sad. He thought of the things he had heard this pastor preach online. "We are not here to serve only the mighty, but the broken. Every soul matters in this place. You don't have to be known to be loved in this church." Fola whispered under his breath. "I was in the same building today. I walked past him twice. I tried to reach him, but I didn't exist." He remembered how the pastor's eyes lit up at the wealthy guest who came forward to greet him. He remembered the precision with which people were filtered, not by spiritual need, but by perceived class. That was what broke him. Not the usher, not the cold seat in the back, not the lack of welcome, but that the man who carried the message missed the moment. Fola returned to church premises on Thursday morning just like he was told. This time, the environment was different. No music, no vibrant choir, just an office block humming with footsteps, murmured prayers, and the occasional sound of a printer whirring. He checked in at the front desk, gave his name, and sat in the counseling reception. The time was 9:47 a.m. By 11:30, nothing. By 1 p.m., still nothing. People came and went. Some left frustrated. A few got called in, but his name never echoed from the narrow corridor leading to the inner offices. By 3:15 p.m., the secretary finally looked up from her screen. "Sir, I am sorry. Pastor had been in back-to-back meetings. He won't be able to see anyone else today. You can come back on Saturday morning. He will be attending to people personally." Fola didn't say a word. He stood, nodded slightly, and walked out. The sun outside was heavy. This wasn't about pride anymore. He had come too far to turn back. He was on a mission. Saturday morning came. Fola arrived by 8 a.m. and waited again. This time, the pastor was around, but in another meeting. By 12:16 p.m., Fola had lost count of how many people had been called in ahead of him. He was tired, hungry, frustrated, but he stayed. At 1:22 p.m., the pastor's assistant finally walked out and called his name. "Brother Fola." Fola stood. The man smiled faintly. "Please, come in." Inside the pastor's office was cool, almost too cool. Leather chairs, bookshelves with gold-lettered spines, a soft gospel instrumental playing from a Bluetooth speaker. Pastor Tunde sat behind his polished desk, flipping through his iPad. He didn't look up immediately. "You're the brother from last week, right? Sorry for the delay. We've had a lot going on." "Yes, sir," Fola said calmly. "Thank you for seeing me." Pastor nodded. "All right, let's be quick, please. I have a dedication in 30 minutes. Fola inhaled slowly. "I came because I need help," he began. "Financial help." The pastor looked up now, curious. "My wife was sick for months. I spent everything on treatment. In the end, I still lost her." The pastor's face barely changed. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said flatly. Fola continued. "Since then, things haven't been the same. I lost my business. I've been squatting with friends. 4 of us in a small room. Life has been hard, but I'm not here to beg. I know how to bounce back. I just need capital to start again. Anything from 200,000 naira to 500,000 naira can get me going." The pastor leaned back. That's a lot. I don't think the church can afford that right now. You know, we are handling some major building projects." Fola nodded. "Even 50,000 naira, sir. I can start something small. I have ideas. I am not lazy. I just need a push." Pastor Tunde smiled briefly and pressed the button on the intercom. "Sister Carol, please send in the church accountant." He turned to Fola. "You will see our accountant. Give him your details and a brief proposal." "Thank you, sir," Fola said. The accountant met him outside with a practiced smile. "Good afternoon, sir. I heard Pastor referred you." "Yes." "Okay, we will need your account details and a short write-up on your business idea. Submit them to the admin desk and we'll process it." Fola did exactly that, and then the waiting game began. 1 week. "Sorry, sir, the proposal hasn't been reviewed yet. Come back on Tuesday." Tuesday came. "Pastor traveled. We can't process anything until he signs off." Another week. "Please, be patient. These things take time." Fola returned again and again. Each time, he was either told to come back or given another vague excuse. By the end of 2nd week, he understood the pattern. They were stringing him along, softly, politely, but deliberately, not with cruelty, but with dismissive professionalism. Still, he went back, until finally, one Friday morning, a secretary told him, "You've been added to our benevolence file. We'll reach out once any funds are released." He didn't argue. He didn't go back again. They never sent him anything, not even 500 naira. He stopped trying. He had seen enough. Now, he could conclude they were no different. But even in that disappointment, Fola didn't turn his back on God. He still streamed your Sunday service online, quietly from his bedroom. He still took notes from sermons. He still prayed. He just stopped paying tithe. He was done sponsoring what his heart could no longer trust. One evening, while studying the Bible and asking God to heal the bitterness forming in his heart, he came across Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 28 to 29. At the end of every third year, bring the tithe of that year's produce and store it in your towns so that the Levites and the foreigners, the fatherless and the widows who live in your towns may come and eat and be satisfied. He paused. Then he read it again and again. Tears welled in his eyes. That was the original purpose: to feed, to care, to satisfy, not to fund ego-driven empires. And he wondered, if I had come as an actual fatherless man, would they still have shut the door in my face? What about the widow in the pew? The students with no food? What happens when the church becomes the Pharisee walking past the beaten man? It had been 3 months since Fola last sent money to the church. He continued watching the services online, but more out of habit than hunger. The sermons were still smooth, polished, rehearsed, but something about them now felt hollow. Like they were aimed at people with things to give, not people with wounds to heal. He had moved on quietly, begun a new logistic project with one of his older contacts in Port Harcourt. He never spoke of what happened in church to anyone, not even his personal assistant. It wasn't pain he wanted to relieve, just something he had tucked away like an old file no longer in use. Until one morning, while he sat in his home office typing emails, a notification popped up at the corner of his screen. From DW Assembly. Subject: "We've missed you, brother F.A." Fola frowned. How did they get my email? He had never filled a membership form, never registered through a portal. He clicked the message open. "Dear brother F.A., we noticed you haven't sent in your tithe in the last 3 months. We hope all is well. DW Assembly appreciates your past generosity and commitment to God's house. We encourage you to remain faithful to the instruction of Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. Bring all the tithe into the storehouse. Your giving matters. Warm regards, DWA Finance and Membership Team." Fola leaned back in his chair. He wasn't angry. He was just stunned. They had never followed up on his request for help, never replied to the proposal he submitted, never even asked if he was okay. But now, months later, they were emailing him because the money stopped flowing. He didn't reply. He just closed his laptop. 2 weeks later, while watching evening news, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. He nearly ignored it, but curiosity won. "Hello," he answered. "Good evening. Am I speaking with brother F.A.?" "Yes, who is this?" "This is Pastor Tunde from DW Assembly." Fola sat up straight. For a few seconds, he said nothing. "We are just reaching out to check on our online members," the pastor said, his tone unusually soft. "Hope you've been well, sir." Fola gave a dry chuckle. "You're reaching out to check on me or to ask why I stopped paying tithe?" There was a pause. Then, a small laugh from the pastor. "Well, maybe both." Fola let out a short, tired sigh. "It is well," he said quietly. "The Lord is still receiving my tithe. I gave it to the people he told us to give to." Then Fola quoted calmly, Matthew chapter 25 verse 40. "Whatever you did to the least of these my brothers, you did it unto me." There was silence on the line. Then a polite, "That's great. God bless you richly. Have a nice night." The call ended. Fola was about to drop the phone when it buzzed again. Same number. He picked. "Sir," Pastor Tunde said, "would you be willing to come to the church office? I would like to speak with you face to face." Fola hesitated, then replied, "No problem, sir. Just send me the time." 2 days later, Fola arrived at the church building in a clean navy blue kaftan, polished black shoes, and his usual understated wristwatch. He called the pastor when he reached the gate. Instead of being made to wait in reception like before, a protocol member came out to escort him directly in. No forms, no queues. There were people in the lobby already waiting to see the pastor, but Fola walked straight past them and was ushered into the inner office. This time, the air smelled different, subtle, still perfumed, still chilled, but different. The pastor stood as Fola entered, extending a hand. "You look familiar," he said, squinting. "Have we met before?" Fola smiled faintly but didn't answer the question. He sat down and folded his hands. "I'm curious, Pastor, why did you call me in?" The pastor cleared his throat. "I felt led to talk to you about something you said on the phone the other day. The idea of giving your tithe to people instead of the church. That's not doctrinal, you know?" "Oh," Fola leaned in calmly. "Let's talk about that." Pastor Tunde leaned back in his chair, his fingers loosely laced over his stomach. He looked calm, but Fola could see it, that subtle tension in his jaw, the kind of unease that comes when someone is trying to stay composed while defending a structure they know may not hold up. "You see, Brother F.A., the pastor began, "when you mentioned that verse the other day, 'Whatever you do to the least of these, you've done to me,' I understood your heart. But I must say, that's not a scripture about tithing. It's about kindness. It's about charity." Fola nodded. "True, but sir, is there a difference between charity and God's intended use for the tithe?" Pastor smiled slightly. "Yes, of course. The Bible clearly says in Malachi chapter 3 verse 10, 'Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house.' That's the principle. We tithe to the church, not to individuals." Fola opened his Bible slowly like someone prepared. "With all due respect, Pastor, I studied that verse too, but I didn't stop there. First, please, did you hear yourself? Let's underline that sentence, that there may be food in my house. Foods are eaten by people. Of course, they weren't asked to bring a tithe into the storehouse so that the food will spoil, but that there may be food, so that they eat and feast." He flipped the pages gently and read aloud. Deuteronomy 14, 28 to 29. "At the end of every third year, bring all the tithe of that year's produce and store it in your towns, so that the Levites and the foreigners, the fatherless and the widows may come and eat and be satisfied." He looked up. "This wasn't just the temple collection, sir. It was shared among the needy, the servants in the house of God, the strangers, everyone." Pastor Tunde blinked. That was the old covenant. It was about agricultural tithe, produce, not cash. Fola nodded. "Yes, because in those days, people didn't use cash like we do now. Their wealth was in grain, animals, and oil. That was their version of income." He flipped again. Deuteronomy 26 verse 12. "When you have finished setting aside a tenth of all your produce in the third year, the year of the tithe, you shall give it to the Levites, the foreigner, the fatherless, the widow." He paused. "I didn't write this, sir. God did." Pastor's tone hardened just a little. "Yes, but in the New Testament, we see the church structure evolve. We give to maintain the work of ministry, to run operations, expand the kingdom." Fola leaned in. "And I agree. I'm not against giving to the church. I've done it faithfully for years, quietly, without even asking for recognition. But when the church receives billion in tithe, and the widow in the choir can't afford medication, and a young brother who lost his job is told to go and pray, have we not broken the very heart of God's instruction?" Pastor looked at him, saying nothing. "I wasn't poor when I came here asking for help," Fola said quietly. "I came to see how you would respond." The pastor sat up, blinking in confusion. "What do you mean?" Fola smiled faintly. "You asked earlier if you've seen my face before, right?" "Yes, sir, you have, month ago. I was the man who came in a faded shirt, worn-out shoes, and asked for financial support to revive a business. I told you my wife had died. I begged for 50,000 naira. You referred me to the accountant." He paused. "I followed up for weeks. I filled forms, wrote proposals, waited, yet I got nothing." Pastor Tunde's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. "I called the number your secretary gave me," Fola continued. "Nobody picked. I came back again and again. I was treated like a nuisance." Pastor swallowed. Now Fola's voice dropped lower. Months later, I stopped sending tithe, and suddenly, your office finds my email, my phone number, a follow-up call, a personal invite. Sir, that tells me one thing. You are more committed to preserving income than touching lives. The room fell into a dense, silent weight. I didn't come to shame you. I came to test the spirit of what you built, Fola added, and honestly, it failed. Not because you didn't give me money, but because you never even looked at me. Pastor's head slowly bowed. He exhaled, long and quiet. I'm sorry, he whispered. I truly am. Fola stood. He wasn't angry, just resolved. I'll keep giving, Pastor, but now I give it directly to the orphan, the widow, the sick, the broken. That's my storehouse now. That's where my tithe goes. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. Sir, will Jesus be proud of the way his church treats the least among us? The pastor said nothing. Fola walked out. It had been a week since the meeting in the pastor's office. Fola never got another call. No follow-up email, no apology letter, no explanation from the accountant, nothing. Just silence, and that was enough. He didn't need a press conference or a public correction. He didn't even expect the church to change. He just needed to know the truth, and now he did. One quiet Sunday morning, while the city was still yawning into daylight, Fola stepped out onto his balcony with a mug of hot ginger tea. He sat on his outdoor chair, opened his Bible, and began to read again. Not out of duty, but from hunger. He had stopped watching DW Assembly's live streams, not out of bitterness, but because he no longer wanted noise. He wanted substance, the kind he felt in that tiny church in London, where someone once gave him a coat and rice without asking for offering afterward. Now, every tithe that left his account went into lives: a widow's rent, a scholarship for street boy, a food pack for a sick chorister whose church still made her sing every Sunday. That was his storehouse now. He thought about church, about the usher who never looked him in the eye, about the accountant who stalled him for weeks with polished grammar and empty promises, about the pastor who had powerful sermons and a full office but no room for a stranger with a trembling voice. And then he thought about Jesus, Jesus who walked dusty roads, Jesus who stopped for the blind man nobody else noticed, Jesus who multiplied food for the crowd before asking for commitment, Jesus who said, whatever you did to the least of these, you did for me. He whispered a prayer, Lord, may I never become so polished that I forget the smell of the hungry. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in months, a sense of peace returned to his chest. Somewhere in another part of town, Pastor Tunde sat alone in his office after service. The crowd had left. The light had dimmed. The phone buzzed beside him, but he ignored it. His mind drifted to the man in the kaftan, the one whose quiet disappointment sat more than any rebuke could. He reached for his Bible, flipped to Matthew 25, and read slowly. And then he whispered, almost afraid of the sound of his own voice, Lord, did I fail you? He didn't know how to answer that question, but for once, he didn't rush into another sermon. He didn't open his planner. He just sat, still, silent, listening. Fola didn't set out to embarrass a church. He set out to find Christ in it. And when he didn't see him there, he made peace with walking a quieter road, one lined with the needs of those too broken to shout, too tired to write proposals. He never told anyone what happened. He didn't write a thread on social media. He just lived differently, because some tests are not meant to expose others. They are meant to refine you. I hope you enjoyed this story. If yes, you will love the next one. Click to watch it now. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.